Welcome into a emergency episode of the Inverted Microphone. I'm Rees, Goodall, joined by the great Joa'o, Lara Jr. This is not our typical episode. This is not the episode that we were predicting to record this week, but because of some breaking news in the footballing world, we are here to deliver our thoughts on it. It's Manchester United sacking Ruben Amorim. Quite the shock given how the results have seemingly picked up over the last little bit, but according to David Ornstein and The Athletic, the relationship between Ruben Amorim and the members of the board, the chairman, just became too sour and could not go on for much longer. But Joa'o, I'll start with how are you today? Start with that, so we're not starting with the Ruben Amorim talk. How are you doing today, Joa'o?
Happy to be here. Always happy to be able to talk to you guys, give my opinion, and just also very happy with the support we've been receiving recently. We read all the comments, we look at everything you guys are saying, so thank you for being engaged and active with us.
Absolutely. But now let's pivot to what the people are here for, what we're here for as well. And that's Ruben Amorim leaving Manchester United. Joa'o, what was your initial reaction to Manchester United's announcement that Ruben Amorim would no longer be in charge of the Red Devils?
Just thinking about it, this morning I was looking at it and I was just puzzled. I was absolutely puzzled. It's something that happens overnight, and it's the first thing I saw this morning. I saw text messages, and I saw tweets, and I saw a lot of different things going out, and I've sort of taken the day to process it as well, right? Because this is a pretty big move and arguably one of the biggest leagues in the world. So just sort of looking at it and seeing all this go on, it's still very puzzling. I don't know what the plan is, and there's a lot of uncertainty behind it, and that's sort of it feels sort of sour as well if you were to ask me about it.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with you about how this is one of the biggest moves we've seen this season. Manchester United, again, sacking Ruben Amorim. Well, I have to agree also with the fact that it came as a shock. I was up at 2:30 Arizona time. I was going to the bathroom. I checked my phone. All of a sudden, David Ornstein notification that Ruben Amorim is gone. The issue, or the fact of the matter is, Ruben Amorim's time with Manchester United is not going to be one that will be looked on too fondly, I think, by most. It is one of the worst by winning percentage tenures we've seen. He finished 63 games, 24 wins, a 38.1 winning percentage. The lowest for a full-time manager since the 70s. Ralph Rangnick was also lower, but he had the interim tag. And, Joa'o, just on Ruben Amorim and really where it went wrong, I want to go back to what I said last week on the podcast. And it was actually my New Year's resolution for him. And it unfortunately led to the downfall of Ruben. I spoke about how he's a very stubborn manager, and we need to see him be able to adjust more in 2026. And the first match of 2026, play Leeds United away. He resorts back to his 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1, however though you actually want to describe it, it's the same thing. And a move that was not looked on fondly by Manchester United. Manchester United had reportedly been pushing Amorim to change his system back to a back four, a more traditional back four. He had experimented it with it in the past. We wanted it a full-on change. And I think I was one of the biggest proponents of pushing the agenda that they need to make this change because, again, a 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1 is outdated in modern football. And again, this is ultimately what led to Ruben Amorim no longer being in charge of Manchester United.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And anyone who would watch this team on a week-to-week basis, or even then just stay sort of informed with the squad, I just think you'd see the same thing, and it was really, it was starting to become an average opinion, and especially all around the league and everyone who watches this team. Once again, it's stubbornness. Stubbornness was his downfall. I totally agree with you there, and it's just, what would it have been if he ends up changing things, if he ends up really playing younger players and giving an opportunity to those from the academy? What could have changed? But even then, we can't go based off of that, right? Because what ifs, they don't exist. We can simply look at reality, and it's going to be very harsh for Manchester United moving on.
Absolutely, and I think one of those things about the stubbornness that needs to be mentioned is the young players. We'll get into that a little bit more on what it means for them, but just a few weeks ago, he called out quite a few young players from the squad that are out on loan and wanted more from them, expected more from them. Whether whether it was out on loan or Cheeto or Obi Martin's case, more with the academy and more with the first team. Ultimately, that made a lot of those players angry. A lot of the ones that were mentioned were not happy with the comments, and somewhat understandably so. The issue now is that Manchester United is a club built on its academy. A lot of its success have come with academy players. I mean, obviously the class of 92 way back when is one of the most storied aspects of this team's history, and it came through the academy. But it's also the streak of having an academy player in the squad year after year, game after game. It started way back in 1937, but it really felt under Amorim that it was a bit of a chore to keep this streak going. Obviously the disagreements with Kobbie Mainoo were apparent from the beginning. Kobbie Mainoo seems to be almost relieved. I'm sure he is with this move, because it means he's going to be back in the fold with his squad. And then, even looking at other academy products, Marcus Rashford, he was not happy with Marcus Rashford from the start. Was a big reason as to why Rashford left on loan originally to Aston Villa, and now an even bigger reason as to why he left on loan this season to Barcelona. Again, Joa'o, knowing these young players' ties to United for 88 years of history, about to be 89 in November. When you see something like that, when you see a manager come in and try to break the tradition, does it almost feel like he's getting off to the wrong start, getting off on the wrong foot before he's even, managed a match?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gets you off the wrong foot, and it's like, this is gonna be totally far fetched, but I think the examples are very similar. Again, I'm not comparing these academies at all, but I think that it's if a manager were to try to go to Barcelona and La Masia, and they're like, yeah, we're just not gonna use La Masia anymore. We're not gonna use a very successful, if not one of the most successful academies in the world. It puzzles me so bad, and you see these players that have had relative success, and it sort of makes you wonder, right? It sort of makes you wonder, what was the long-term what was that project? Because even then, you look at his squads at Sporting, they were comprised of mostly players who would come in on transfers. They'd always bring in players from really random leagues. They'd make it work. But at the same time, they still had academy players like Pedro Gonçalves that still flourished and were able to help this team grow and sort of expand. So just very puzzling what went on from the beginning, but at the same time, it's very difficult, right? I said it was sour at the beginning of the episode. I said that this feeling is a little bit sour just because you don't want to get rid of a manager in the middle of the season, but at the same time, if it's not now, it's never, right? Essentially.
Yeah, and again, going back to those younger players, a big part of why Ruben Amorim almost wouldn't include these younger players in the squad is because of his reliance on the 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1, which is a very unique system, and it's not like every single player is molded to it. You've got to find the players to fit the mold, and that all honestly made this move such a puzzling decision from the get-go. Is because when Ruben Amorim was hired, Manchester United were talking about how they wanted to hire a head coach and then fit the players and then make sure the head coach used those players. Bringing in Amorim was almost the total opposite, because again, you needed to bring in guys like Patrick Dorgu, for example, to play as a wing back. You needed to make these moves to fit his system, which in all honesty, for a guy who isn't as proven as some of these other managers in the Premier League, is a bit of a ridiculous and puzzling decision in my eyes. And to be honest, I think though, with some of the versatility that United's picked up, it's only going to help them. Now, back to my comments about the head coach. Ruben Amorim had some very, very interesting comments following the Leeds match, which was apparently the final straw between Omar Barada, who is the chief executive of Manchester United, and the director of football, Jason Wilcox. The relationship had been breaking down for a while, apparently, but then following the 1-1 draw away to Leeds, Ruben Amorim had some very interesting comments. He said, quote, "I know my name is not Tuchel, Conte, or Mourinho, apologies, but I'm the manager of Manchester United. I'm going to be Manchester United's manager, not coach. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to do my job until another guy is here to replace me." I think the second part of that quote, "I'm going to be Manchester United's manager, not coach," is really what led to the downfall of this, is because he wanted a more hands-on approach with every little thing, and ultimately Manchester United, namely Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada, were not willing to give that to him, and the relationship was so sour, so far gone, there's nothing they could do besides just sever the ties and move on.
Yeah, the only thing that I can see really out of this, and the only thing that Manchester United fans should really go ahead and applaud, is that this club it's finally changing in terms of the higher ups. I feel like in years past and years prior, this wouldn't have happened. They would have kept this manager end of the season and then eventually let him go. Yeah, this feels very similar to the Ralph Rangnick situation. Whenever Cristiano Ronaldo ended up doing the interviews with Piers Morgan, talking about the facilities, talking about the way the club was ran, talking about all of these things, I just think that it's good that executives are finally putting their foot down. They're saying, hey, nobody is bigger than this institution. Yes, you can run things, but at the same time, there has to be this cordial respect. There has to be this functional relationship in order for it to work. And I think it's better, right? It definitely helps a locker room as well. Because if you let this toxic relationship continue, if you let all of this just sort of continue to flow from now until June, I mean, we're 6 months away, 5 months away. It could have ended up bad, and things could have gotten even worse. So it's finally good that the institution is trying to change its approach to how they run things, and especially with managers, something that we haven't seen for a very long time now.
Yeah, and it's a polar opposite of situation compared to what happened last season, where Erik ten Hag was the manager of Manchester United. He wins that FA Cup in May 2024, and ultimately they do sack him mid-season last year, not mid-season, but October. Ultimately, the reason Ten Hag kept his job until October was because of that FA Cup, when almost everybody in the world knew they should have just cut him then. They should have let him go and found something else. And so it's good that United haven't just kept on because of these small achievements, like making the Europa League final last year. Although they didn't win it, they still made it. So it is something to be proud of, not for a club like Manchester United. Back to the appointment of Ruben Amorim. When Amorim was first hired and appointed manager, head coach, whatever you decide to call it, of Manchester United, he came out and said, I prefer not to take this job now, because he's taking it over in the middle of the season, didn't have a preseason to implement his tactics, and then he had to join in the thick of it while United were deep into their season. They had a festive fixtures schedule coming up when they weren't going to be able to have training sessions multiple times a week to try and implement his quite complicated system to implement mid-season. I wonder how much of a problem that was, because it's kind of the same thing to what Wilfred Nancy just struggled with in Celtic, is that he came in middle of the season in this difficult position and tried to implement his tactics, but he wasn't going to be able to have the time to be able to do this. How much of a problem do you think that was, Joa'o?
I think it was definitely a huge problem from the get-go. I mean, especially when you're trying to implement a system of this manner, and especially when you're trying to put so many pieces into play, it's not very sensible, right? And it's just, at that point, if you're Ruben Amorim, you sort of have to consider these things and, hey, do I want to implement a different style of play, a similar style of play that this team is playing with components that are still here to my usage? Or, it's just, there was never really any consideration, and Ruben Amorim was very direct from the get-go. I want things to be this way, and this way, but at the same time, it's very odd. It was very reckless, and when you look at it and looking at things in hindsight now, especially if you're a Manchester United fan, you have to realize stuff wasn't going right. Yes, we were having, I say we as the fan, right? But yes, Manchester United was having these somewhat successful results. They were able to pull out a result or two. They went far in the Europa League. But after that, what really was it? You were struggling against bottom half squads. You were still getting humiliated by your rivals, whoever you want to consider it. I don't know if it was delusion. I don't know if it was really just that yearning feeling, the yearning for change that made Manchester United fans think maybe he's the guy, maybe he has it. Because you go down the list of everything and you have to sit down and think, was this the right decision from the get-go?
I think Ruben Amorim in the time was the right manager to a point from a Manchester United perspective and the names that were on the market. The issue was it was November. If it had been June, July, it would have been a great addition, great manager to bring into the Premier League and, get a see of what his tactics are, how experimental they can be in the Premier League. Ultimately, again, I do think this boils down to the timing of his appointment, never set him up for success. And that's one of the things that went wrong. I do think that the timing of this decision is a little bit puzzling. It's not United's worst run of form this season. I mean, I think to open the year, they were quite poor. They dropped points against Arsenal, Fulham, lost against Grimsby. They're just coming off 2 draws now. I think, honestly, the fact that he lasted this long in a way is interesting to me. But again, though, when you draw against Wolves and Leeds, that is not promising. That is not something that you want to see. No disrespect to Leeds United in this case, because Leeds have turned it up a notch. They are finding ways to get points left and right. They've drawn their last 3 games. They are unbeaten in their last 7. 2 of those draws have come against Liverpool. They beat Chelsea as well, so they're no scrubs. But it's also a rivalry match, and that is, it's a bit unacceptable in a way. No, it's not a bit. It is unacceptable to lose rivalry matches, and I'm going to count this as a loss because they came out and played quite poorly. And then he makes those press conference comments. Moving on out to the future of Man United. For now, they have appointed Darren Fletcher as the interim manager. There are no plans to bring a permanent manager until the summer. However, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer does have interest in coming in a interim role, similar to what Ralf Rangnick did in 2022, where his lone job was to come in, manage for 6 months, and then he'd leave. And he was meant to become the sporting director. Ultimately, that never came into fruition, but he was still the manager for 6 months. Joa'o, first off, appointing Darren Fletcher, Man United, he's played there for quite a bit. He hasn't just played there. He's one of the United Premier League. He's not United Premier League great, but he's played there for 13 years, right? Excuse me. He also has his 2 sons in the squad, 2 twins, Jack and Tyler Fletcher. Joa'o, appointing Fletcher as the interim manager for now. He has not had a full, proper professional managing gig, though he has been with the U18s, again, for Manchester United. What are your thoughts on Fletcher being the guy for now, at least?
It's always scary, right? It's always scary whenever you see these interim managers come to play, especially when they haven't had experience at the helm. It's very worrying. It's very worrying. But for some reason, every time Manchester United were to seem to have this caretaker, they have this mystic to them. They have this sort of little run of games. They have a good 3-run, 4-run, 5-run. I just don't think this is the case, especially in the point of where you're in the season. I mean, looking at Manchester United fixtures going on, it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task, and even then, you can't rule out these bottom half clubs as well, just because anything can happen on a given day in the Premier League. Now, if Solskjaer were to make the return as an interim manager, I'd have a little bit more confidence. But really, if you're a Manchester United fan, you can't be expecting Europe anymore. I really don't think you can be expecting Europe. I think that a mid-table finish is really ensuing, unless if Fletcher, can turn it around, implement a system with the pieces that he has, which they're not the best pieces per se, but if you can try to utilize them in a different form, you might be able to get something out of them, and you might be able to squeeze out of the middle of the table, right? But still, there's so much left to define. There's so much left to see, and it's just this is a matter of time. This is a matter of time, and everything is going to be happening as it goes, right?
Yeah, and to Darren Fletcher, back to him. He has been with he was the U18's head coach starting this year, but he's been around for quite a bit, different roles. He was formerly the technical director before that role was moved to Jason Wilcox. Back though to Fletcher. After a U18's game in August, he spoke about how his style of play wants to be. He wants to play this team, and he mentioned about how he wants to score those counterattack goals. He wants to play fast, kind of that quote unquote proper United style, which is what he used. I'm intrigued to see how that would work because Darren Fletcher left United in 2013, I believe it was. We're 13 years on from that. That kind of United DNA that he mentioned is a little bit outdated. You're going to need to find a way to tweak that. I'm intrigued to see what the path is with Darren Fletcher. What do you think?
Again, it's just very difficult to implement the system, and just sort of looking at the components that are available right now. Defensively, I think that you might be able to get something down the wings. Again, you have seen Amad Diallo be so versatile down that right-hand side, and I think Patrick Dorgu also has the pace, and he's been on a great run of form recently. What concerns me about this team is the midfield. It's just the midfield. Bruno Fernandes could be up for the task, but the issue is after Bruno Fernandes, you have Kobbie Mainoo, which at this point I think that Amorim being gone is good for the squad, because you do hopefully end up retaining a player like Mainoo. He might be able to fulfill the role. But after that, it's just very difficult, right? Casemiro is old, 33 years old. Ugarte, a lot of fans have a very strong opinion about him that could get this show canceled. And then your next option is Mason Mount. And it's just, it's very difficult. And don't get me started up top, because if you end up playing something like a 4-3-3, yes, you can use Cunha and Mbeumo. That helps out your counter-attacking style of football. The issue is in the striker department. Benjamin Šeško, he's been struggling this season. Yes, he's young. Yes, he's 22 years old. But at the same time, it's either he's battling with injury, either he is just struggling to find the back of net. Does he have the pace rate? Yes. It's still very concerning. And even then, players coming off the bench, don't get me started, because we're going to be here all day talking about how Manchester United cannot fully play a counter-attacking style of football. It's possible, yes, but it won't be as successful as Fletcher wants it to be.
If Fletcher does come in and changes his system to a 4-3-3, I'm not going to go through the whole lineup, but looking at the front three, which is something that you mentioned, the front three would very likely be Matheus Cunha on the left, Bryan Mbeumo on the right, or Amad Diallo on the right. In that case, who's the striker? In my eyes, I honestly would like to see Joshua Zirkzee play there. Why? Because the last two games he's came on as a substitute against Wolves, against Leeds, he's scored or assisted in both. I have been very much impressed by him over the last little bit. I know he wants to move. I know United fans aren't sold on him, sold on the price tag. I think this is a good option to right the boat and allow Šeško some time to be not the guy. I also think with Šeško, a big part of his issue is there's a bit of an over-reliance on him at times. He's only got 2 goals in 17 games, rather. I think that's an issue with him, and I also think you have to look at it on the other side of the coin, though, is if you remove him from the lineup and you take away too much game time, can he find the form? Joa'o, just on the front three, what is, if they go to the 4-3-3 again, what is your desired trio up there, and who do you want as the 9?
I think that Cunha is a good option down the left, the right. It's very similar. It's very similar to what you just said. I mean, Mbeumo can fit in that right if it's necessary. I think Mbeumo is versatile enough to play a striker role. I don't think he'd be. He's definitely not a target guy, but somebody you want to use to try to draw out some defenders, create space, maybe have some overlapping runs in, sort of like last season, the way Manchester United played. That was one positive. Didn't really see it this season. You could see Mbeumo as striker, but I mean Zirkzee isn't a bad option as well. Zirkzee did have a good run last season. He had a couple of moments where he popped in. He did the job, and he came in clutch. I mean, it's that simple, right? So I mean, it is a great opportunity for Zirkzee, and I definitely understand what you say about Šeško as well, just because he's 22 years old, first season in the Premier League. You can't rely on him to be the guy because he's not there yet. So I mean, either one of those two, whether it's Zirkzee, whether it's Mbeumo, I wouldn't be mad at either of them, just because you have that depth on the right wing. Change it up at striker. I mean, you've lost your manager. You're an interim. What's the worst that can happen? You're not gonna. I don't mean this harshly, but you're not gonna retain the job at the end of the day. Try something new, and if it sticks, hey, work with it, take credit for it, and move on.
I also think another option at striker, I would be Matheus Cunha, of course, because he has played there this season quite a bit, actually. The issue, though, becomes if you play Cunha as striker, all of a sudden, who do you play on the left? You know, there's options. I know you could probably try and fit Patrick Dorgu in there. You could try and fit all these different players. I think it could get ugly if you really try and move these guys around. But back to the original Manchester United statement, or rumors rather, from The Athletic, where it sounds like they will not find a permanent option until the summer. Now, Joa'o, this is something we spoke about before coming on air. Is that something that is a quite risky way to do things? Because what is this summer? This summer is the World Cup, so you're already going to have a shorter preseason compared to normal, right? And a lot of those premier managers that would be assigned to a Manchester United in the thought process, whether it's Thomas Tuchel, whether it's Mauricio Pochettino, or someone else that's out of the fold completely from those two names I mentioned, they are going to be employed until mid-July if they go all the way. Even if they don't go all the way, they're going to be employed until July at the very least. And because of that, they're going to have less time with the club. They're going to have less time with the technical director, sporting director, all these different pieces to be able to build the foundation for Manchester United. So with that being said, who do you want to see Manchester United go for in the summer? Whether it's Tuchel, Olivier Glasner is a name that's been mentioned. Who do you want?
I would love to see Olivier Glasner. I mean, just seeing the progress that he's done so far with this Palace team, I really like him. I really think he'd function at Manchester United. But at the same time, just going back to the original statement, I don't like the way it frustrates me. It frustrates me to see that a club like Manchester United is waiting so long, and they're trying to wait for stuff in the summer. You can work stuff out, not as much as you want during the season, right? But you can definitely try something with the pieces you have, and then at the point. And then what also isn't that good is that when you're with the team for that long, for example, if a manager were to pick up Manchester United today or tomorrow, you can see who works, you can see who doesn't work. You can go to the World Cup, you can see who plays in what manner, how do they play, how do they perform, how do they fit in your system. Hey, we want to submit a bid because the World Cup is essential for many players because that's where they get their big moves. That's where they get their big moves because they perform, because they show what they can do on the world's biggest stage, and Manchester United isn't going to have that. a manager who is coming in June isn't going to have that short list and isn't going to have the opportunity to say, hey, well, I want to play this way and I want this guy, because you don't know what you have in your system. Now, I think Glasner would be great. I think Tuchel would be great. Pochettino, I don't know. He's really a hit or miss for me. Yes, he has a Premier League experience, but I'm just not sold. I'm not sold on Poch. I don't know why. It's more of a gut feeling. I couldn't explain to you in specific terms why. But really, Tuchel and Glasner are those front runners for me, just because you see the work that they've done. I mean, Tuchel's a big name, a household name, but Glasner, I mean, he gets that big move to a big club who has been waiting to come back for a big while, and I think that he's the guy to get the job done, if we're being completely honest here.
I think with Glasner, my biggest worry is that he plays a very similar formation to that of Manchester United, Olivier Glasner plays a very similar formation to Ruben Amorim did. And now I do think Glasner is nowhere near as stubborn as Ruben Amorim will be over the time of wherever his next job will be. But what that could mean is it could lead you down the same track where if you stick with that formation, you're going to stick with that stubbornness. Now, I do think it is going to be a number one criteria almost, besides actually having managerial experience, is to play a back four. Based off the reports that I've seen from what Jason Wilcox has said, it sounds like a back four is going to be necessity. I'm going to raise a couple names here for you now. The first name is a guy who just got sacked recently. You know who it is going to be. I see the grin on your face. Enzo Maresca. Just got sacked by Chelsea, or rather, mutual termination, whatever, it's sacked. He was building something at Chelsea. There were times when it looked good. There were times when it looked bad. Would you be open to seeing Enzo Maresca be the next manager of Manchester United?
I would
His
not
head's already
touch
shaking.
Enzo Maresca with the 6-foot pole.
What about a 10-foot pole?
10-foot. No. The issue here is, right, football has always been a game of egos. It has always been whether a player has a big ego, a manager has a big ego, and I just think there'd be a clash. And even if he were to implement a system that works, I just think that there'd be this toxicity. I think that there'd be this sort of bad aura in the locker room, and then that affects your style of play as well. I mean, that you've seen it multiple times, and you see players not be able to function in a cohesive manner because of this toxicity, because the relationship is broken. I mean, obviously you need the ability to play football, but you also need that chemistry, and you also need to be able to understand your partner whenever it comes to an actual match. Yeah,
and I think, again, going down the Enzo Maresca route would be very similar to going down the Ruben Amorim route, where it's a big ego and a guy that doesn't really want to be a yes man to the sporting director, to the chief executive, and I think that would be the wrong decision going to pick Enzo Maresca. The second name is another guy who has Premier League experience. I'm not straying outside of the Premier League. Eddie Howe from Newcastle. Newcastle have obviously done really well over these last few years. They've been in the Champions League a pair of times. They also have a ton of money at their disposal, which is a big part of why they've had this success, though. But Eddie Howe, he's been a manager with Bournemouth, manager with Newcastle United in the Premier League. He's got Champions League experience. Do you think he would be open to taking this job? Because, again, some may view Newcastle as a better job than Manchester United at this point in time, because Newcastle have had more success by technicality over the recent years, especially by their own standards. Would you think he takes it? And if he does take it, would you like to see him manage Manchester United?
In terms of he takes it, the issue here is there's also the monetary factor at play. I think that if Newcastle's owners were aware that Eddie Howe could possibly have a move to a Manchester United, I think they do everything possible in their power to try to keep him monetarily. Has that been an issue for Manchester United? No. Even then, just sort of looking at that as well, it's very It's very difficult, right? It's very difficult. I don't think he takes the job personally, just because you're essentially doing a whole rebuild. You're essentially starting from scratch again. And even then, if he were to accept the decision and go to Manchester United, I just still I'm iffy, right? I'm looking at the stats right now. 105 in the win column, 39 and 58 in draws and losses. He's done a considerable job, and he's done the job correctly so far. I'd give him an opportunity, especially because you're looking for a manager who's Premier League proven, and he has it. And he's done sort of the rebuild job similarly. I mean, Newcastle in 2021, when he picked up the job, they weren't relatively near where they are today. So I'd like to see it.
Yeah, a big issue of that is that Eddie Howe is currently making roughly £6 million a year, and there is an undisclosed length left on his contract. It seems to be 3 years. Again, Manchester United are certainly going to have their work cut out for them when deciding to select a new manager. There's a million different routes they can go down to. If it's Premier League proven, is it going to be, some young genius in the Bundesliga? Do they maybe go for like a Fabian Hürsler who's at Brighton, a De Zerbi? There's a million different options. And really, until the rumors come out, the best place to listen to the discussion is here on the Inverted Microphone. But I think that's going to wrap up our Ruben Amorim emergency podcast. We will, Joa'o, sit with me. We will be having a podcast again later this week, previewing the FA Cup and some of the other Premier League midweek matches. It'll be Darren Fletcher's first match in charge of United. Callum McFarlane, he just had a masterclass against City, so we'll talk about that too. But, Joa'o, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Spotify Podcast, YouTube, at The Inverted Microphone. Joa'o, they can follow you on TikTok, and they can follow you on Twitter where?
On TikTok at VJL Football, and on Twitter at the Joa'o Lara. Joa'o Reports. Wow.
Washed. Doesn't even know his own Twitter. You can follow me on TikTok at Rees FC, even though I haven't posted there in a while. Don't remind me. Follow me on Twitter at Rees Goodall, ReesGoodall. Anyways, it's a beautiful game, but it's a way more beautiful game when the dramatics of not just football, but Manchester United keep on giving us drama to watch. Thank you, and have a good one.